I don't think that one part of a story is more important than another part. Some people say that the beginning and the end are the most important because that is what people remember the most, and maybe there's something to that. But I don't know if any of them have more importance than the other. That being said, I do think it's important to know how to end your story, and that can be a little difficult. So today I'm going to be talking about one key principle that can help you know when you should end your story. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. I don't know if I've talked about this in the past, but I've had difficulty with beginnings and endings, particularly beginnings, but endings are difficult as well. And I know I've said before that the reason why endings and beginnings are difficult is because they create the boundaries of your story. And if you know the boundaries, you can fit logical sequences inside those boundaries to create the story, or to create the rest of the story, is what I mean. So getting to the end and having a feeling that you need to keep on writing is normal. That happens to a lot of people. I think that it mostly happens to people who are newer writers, but if you are an experienced writer and that happens to, I wouldn't feel bad because everyone has a different expertise in writing and yours just doesn't happen to be the endings right now. So for anyone, if you run into your ending and then you think you have to write more, and then you write more and you think you still have to write more, I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of us have had that problem or even still have this problem. Now, the advice I've heard for dealing with the ending of your book is actually really bad advice. It can result in a good ending, but it's such obtuse writing advice because it doesn't get to the heart of what you're doing at the ending of your book. It's definitely advice you can follow. It's easy advice to follow, but it's a shot in the dark, and you may be hurting your writing instead of actually helping it. The advice I hear a lot is just cut a chunk off the end of your book, and you'll probably be just fine with the ending you have left. Again, I don't like this advice because it doesn't actually say anything about endings and how endings work, and it doesn't actually help the person who's writing. It doesn't help them write better endings. It just gives this weird prescription to do something to your writing that might help or might not. Imagine if you applied the same advice to any other part of your writing. I don't think we would actually take this advice in the same way. Imagine if you were reading through a book and you're like, well, I don't know what to do here. And some writing coach or writing teacher is just like, well, maybe you should just cut that out. Now, it might be the case that you need to cut certain things out. I'm not against cutting certain things out. In the past, I've talked about one of the books I'm working on and how I'm going to be cutting out about 70,000 words. That's a lot. I'm cutting it for a purpose, though. I'm cutting it because I know how writing works, I know how storytelling works, and I want to have as polished of a piece as possible. So if you're just cutting something out because you don't know what to do with it, or if you're cutting it out because of something arbitrary, stop, because it might be the case that you need the thing you're cutting out. And you might even need that thing you're cutting out in that specific place where it was cut from. If we want to understand how to deal with the end of our story, we need to understand the purpose of an ending. So what is the purpose of the ending of your story? Very simply, it is to assert the change that happened in the story. I've talked about the different parts of a story in the past, the beginning, middle, and end. I have another episode on it if you want to check that out here, or in the description if you're listening to this on audio. When I talk about the beginning and the ending of a story, I talk about this idea of an old normal and a new normal, or an old stasis and a new stasis. Everything in the book is moving toward the new normal, which is at the end of the book. The new normal can take a lot of different forms. You can get to the new normal in a lot of different ways, but you have that old normal. It's different than the new one, and then the new normal is what your character or your world or whatever is changing into that you're showing in the book. Another way to say this that might click better with people is that you're showing the result of what happened in the book. So how does knowing what the ending is for help us end our stories? Well, since we have a purpose, we're trying to meet that purpose in the ending of the story. The goal is to actually figure out what that new normal is going to be and write that new normal into the end of our story. And if we can do that adequately, then our purpose has been fulfilled. The purpose of the ending of the story is fulfilled when we've adequately written that new normal, that new stasis, into the ending of the book. Again, the purpose is fulfilled once we've adequately shown what has resulted from the events of our book. And this can be in so many different areas. It isn't just in character change. If you've ever seen the first Back to the Future movie, one of the new normals in the Back to the Future movie, when Marty McFly gets back to the present day, is that instead of Twin Pines Mall, it is now Lone Pine Mall because he knocked over one of the trees when he was in the past. That is part of the new normal. If you want to see this change from an old normal to a new normal, I think looking at the Back to the Future movies is an excellent way to see it because there is such a stark contrast, and you can actually see that the things that Marty McFly does in the past or the little changes that happen in the past have huge ramifications on the future. And you're doing something similar in your story. You're showing what has happened because of the different things happening in your story. And it's not even necessarily just the things your main character is doing. I think your main character should have a big impact on your story in most cases. But in a lot of cases, you're showing the development of your story and you're bringing your story from that old normal to that new normal. And if you can show that new normal adequately, and I know I'm repeating this again, if you can show that new normal adequately, then you've gotten to a point where you can end the book. So how does this look in a story besides Back to the Future? Imagine if you have a good character turning bad. To emphasize this good character turning bad, you can have the character stealing something or doing some horrible act. In the TV show Breaking Bad, at the end of the story, there's a bad result for the main character. And this bad result is because of everything that came before in the story. It all led up to this point. That was the change the main character made in his life. So the old stasis was that he was this weak little man. The new stasis is that he's this hardened criminal, and this hardened criminal naturally comes to a brutal end. You can also have a bad character becoming good. In the original Star Wars trilogy, the character of Darth Vader is redeemed. And this is a direct result of his son's intervention. You can see the whole entire third film moving toward this goal as Luke Skywalker says, hey, I think there's still good in my father, and he keeps pushing in that direction that there's good in his father. And the end result of that is that Darth Vader gets redeemed at the end of the movie. So there's something happening in the story. And one of the things we need to show at the end of that story is that Darth Vader either gets redeemed or he doesn't get redeemed. We have to show the redemption of that character. Now, you might be able to say, well, he threw the Emperor down a pit. So isn't that showing the redemption of the character? That's different because the character's still in his mask. The character is still functioning as Darth Vader. There is an explicit change in Darth Vader at the end of the film when his mask is taken off. You might even say that he literally changes from Darth Vader back to Anakin Skywalker. He's a Jedi again, and you might even say that he goes from being a cyborg to being a human again. Now, of course, it is the case that the simpler the story, the quicker the ending you can have. This is why children's books that have pictures in them that are 10 pages long only take one page to actually show the ending. But if you have 7 different storylines within a book, if you have tons of different characters, it's going to take longer to show the ending. This is why the ending of Lord of the Rings, let's just be really cliche and talk about the biggest things ever. This is why the ending of Lord of the Rings takes so long, because there's so many different characters that the story is juggling, and we need to see the ending of those characters' stories. So we have one ending, then we have another, and we have another, and finally we get the ending of Frodo Baggins and what happens to him. And we need that ending. That ending is really important because imagine having everyone else's ending and then just ending the story. I've actually run into storylines that don't have an ending. They don't show what happens at the end. And in some cases, there might be a reason for the author or the writer to do that. They might be continuing the story and extending it over multiple different seasons or books, etc. That's their own choice. But when they get to the end of the story, they have to show the new normal. What is the new way in which the world works? And if you can adequately explain the new way in which the world works and the new way in which the main character functions, and you can explain all the things that change, all the important things that change because of the storyline, you can end your story and you'll be just fine. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.